My parents gave $30 million to my sister and told me to earn my own money. Then Grandpa gave me. My name is Samantha Harper, and I am 29 years old. For as long as I can remember, I have lived in the shadow of my older sister Rebecca. To the world, we were the perfect Harper daughters, elegant, accomplished, raised in a sprawling colonial mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, by parents who seemed to have cracked the code of success. But behind those perfectly manicured lawns and holiday card smiles, the truth was suffocating. Rebecca was the crown jewel, the shining example, the flawless masterpiece my parents displayed like a trophy of their own brilliance. I was the consolation prize, tolerated but never celebrated, allowed to exist in their orbit as long as I didn't dare dream of stepping into the spotlight. They never had to say it out loud. The way Dad's face would light up when Rebecca walked into his study, compared to the polite nod I received, said everything. The way Mom would beam when introducing Rebecca at charity galas while barely mentioning my name spoke volumes. My father, Jonathan Harper, was a real estate mogul who built his empire on precision and control. Every time I mentioned wanting to pursue photography seriously, to maybe open my own studio, his jaw would tighten like I'd suggested burning money. He'd call my dreams artistic phases, with the same tone people use when discussing a rash that might clear up eventually. My mother, Patricia, never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any scream. When Rebecca graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, Mom threw a party that made the society pages. When I graduated from the Art Institute of Chicago, she sent a congratulations text. Rebecca herself was undeniably brilliant. Valedictorian at Choate, Harvard undergrad, then that MBA, straight into Harper Real Estate as Dad's right hand. She married Andrew Thornton, a successful investment banker whose family owned half of Martha's Vineyard, and together they became Connecticut's power couple under 30. Meanwhile, I juggled wedding photography gigs in Brooklyn, living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped studio apartment above a pizza place. The smell of pepperoni seeped through my floorboards while I edited photos of other people's happiest moments, wondering if I'd ever have my own. I was the family disappointment, the cautionary tale, the daughter who chose passion over practicality and was paying the predictable price. When our grandfather, Thomas Harper, passed away last October, I braced myself for the usual family gathering, polite condolences mixed with barely concealed judgment about my life choices. I expected maybe a small inheritance, perhaps a sentimental piece of jewelry, definitely some well-meaning advice about getting serious about my future. What I never expected was for everything I believed about my place in this family to shatter completely in that oak-paneled lawyer's office on Fifth Avenue. But that moment was still coming, and I had no idea how dramatically my life was about to change. What happened at the lawyer's office that would change everything? The law offices of Sterling, Walsh & Associates felt like a mausoleum, all dark wood and hushed voices, the kind of place where wealthy families come to divvy up their legacies. I sat in the corner, wearing my only black dress that didn't have paint stains, watching my parents and Rebecca command the room with their usual confidence. Mr. Sterling, Grandpa Thomas's longtime attorney, shuffled through papers with ceremonial gravity. He read Rebecca's inheritance first, and it was everything I'd expected: $15 million in liquid assets, controlling shares in Harper Real Estate, the family's compound in the Hamptons, and Dad's prized collection of vintage Porsches. My parents practically glowed. Mom squeezed Rebecca's hand while Dad nodded approvingly, as if this massive windfall was simply the natural order of things. Rebecca accepted it all with her typical composed grace, already calculating how to expand the family empire. Then Mr. Sterling cleared his throat and said my name. To my granddaughter, Samantha Harper, he read slowly, I leave the contents of a private safety deposit box, to be accessed by her alone, along with these sealed instructions. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on the room. Dad's face went through several emotions before settling on embarrassed irritation. Well, he said with forced lightness, I suppose Thomas wanted to make sure Samantha learned to stand on her own 2 feet. Character building, you know. I wanted to disappear into the Persian carpet. Here I was, 29 years old, getting what felt like a consolation prize while my sister inherited enough money to buy a small country. Mom gave me one of her practiced sympathetic smiles, the kind reserved for distant relatives with unfortunate circumstances. But Mr. Sterling wasn't finished. He handed me an envelope with my name written in Grandpa's familiar handwriting, along with a small brass key. Your grandfather was very specific about this, Samantha. The contents of Box 247 at Manhattan Trust are yours alone. He also left instructions that you're to read his letter privately before accessing the box. After everyone filed out, making plans for Rebecca's inheritance celebration dinner that I somehow wasn't invited to, I sat alone in that quiet office and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The letter was 3 pages long, written in Grandpa's careful script. But it was the first paragraph that made my hand shake so badly I almost dropped the paper. My dearest Samantha, if you're reading this, then my time has come and gone. I know today probably felt like another reminder of how little our family values your gifts. I know you're sitting there feeling forgotten, overlooked, dismissed. But I need you to understand something that will change your life forever. You were never the disappointment. You were my hope. Cliffhanger. What did Grandpa Thomas mean? What was in that safety deposit box that would change Samantha's life forever? I could barely focus on the words through my tears, but I forced myself to keep reading. Grandpa Thomas wrote about watching me at family gatherings, how I'd slip away to photograph the light filtering through windows, or sketch the guests when I thought no one was looking. He'd seen something in me that no one else had bothered to notice. You remind me so much of your grandmother, Helen, he wrote. She was an artist too, a brilliant photographer whose work your father dismissed as hobbyist nonsense. After she died, he packed away all her photographs and never spoke of her passion again. But I kept them, Samantha. I kept everything. My breath caught. I'd never known Grandma Helen had been a photographer. In all the family stories, she was just the perfect wife and mother, never a creative person with her own dreams. The letter continued, for the past 15 years, I've been secretly collecting contemporary photography. Not just any photography, works by artists who capture life the way you do, with honesty and heart. The collection is now worth over $35 million, and it's all yours. Along with the warehouse space in Soho where it's housed, and a trust fund to maintain it. I had to read that paragraph 3 times before the numbers sank in. $35 million. In photography. For me. But this isn't just about money, my dear girl. It's about purpose. I've also purchased a building in Chelsea, 4 floors that can be converted into the most beautiful photography gallery and studio space New York has ever seen. I want you to create something extraordinary, something that honors both your grandmother's memory and your own incredible talent. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the letter. He'd been planning this for years while I scraped together rent money and ate ramen noodles for dinner. Your parents will try to contest this. They'll claim I wasn't of sound mind, that you manipulated an old man. I've prepared for their predictable response. Every document is ironclad, every decision witnessed and recorded. The lawyers have video testimony from me explaining my reasoning. They cannot touch this gift. The final paragraph broke me completely. You are not the family disappointment, Samantha. You are my legacy. Not because of money, but because you see beauty where others see ordinary moments. You capture truth while others stage perfection. The world needs your eye, your heart, your vision. Stop hiding your light under their expectations. That afternoon, Mr. Sterling drove me through Manhattan's crowded streets to the warehouse in Soho. Inside, I found room after room of carefully preserved photographs. Ansel Adams, Annie Leibovitz, Vivian Maier, and dozens of contemporary artists whose work took my breath away. And then, in the final room, I found a section labeled simply Helen Harper. Dozens of my grandmother's photographs lined the walls, street scenes from 1960s New York, intimate family portraits, artistic studies of light and shadow that rivaled anything in the collection. At the center of the display was a photograph I'd never seen. My grandmother standing in what was clearly an artist's studio, camera in hand, eyes blazing with creative fire. How would Samantha's family react when they discovered the truth about her inheritance? The explosion came exactly as Grandpa Thomas had predicted. 2 days after I'd visited the warehouse, Dad's lawyer called demanding to see all the documentation. When they realized the inheritance was legitimate and legally bulletproof, the real Thomas Harper emerged. You manipulated him, Dad accused during a heated phone call. A sick old man, and you took advantage of his confusion to steal what belonged to this family. I tried to explain that I'd known nothing about the collection, that Grandpa had planned this entirely on his own. But Dad had already constructed his version of events, and nothing I said would change his mind. $35 million in art that should have gone to someone who understands business, who could have managed it properly. Instead, it goes to someone who can't even afford health insurance. Mom's approach was more subtle but equally devastating. She started her campaign with concerned phone calls to distant relatives, painting me as the manipulative granddaughter who'd somehow convinced poor Thomas to disinherit the responsible children. "We're worried about Samantha," I heard her tell my Aunt Margaret during a call I accidentally overheard. "This sudden windfall. We're not sure she's emotionally equipped to handle this kind of responsibility. Thomas wasn't himself those last few months, you know." Rebecca's betrayal cut deepest. We'd never been close, but I'd hoped that maybe, with both of us now financially secure, we could finally build some kind of sisterly relationship. Instead, she sued. Her lawsuit claimed that Grandpa Thomas had been suffering from early-stage dementia when he changed his will. She presented evidence of his declining mental state, missed appointments, he'd been secretly meeting with gallery owners, unusual financial transactions, the art purchases, and erratic behavior, spending time with his granddaughter who shared his newly revealed passion for photography. The legal battle consumed 3 months of my life. Every day brought new depositions, new character assassinations, new attempts to prove I was an undeserving gold digger. Rebecca's lawyers painted me as a failed artist who'd preyed on an elderly man's loneliness. During this nightmare, my phone stopped ringing. Family friends who'd known me since childhood suddenly had no time for conversations. Invitations to family events disappeared. Even my cousin Jamie, who'd been like a brother to me growing up, started responding to my texts with one-word answers. The isolation was crushing. I'd moved into a small apartment near the warehouse, spending my days surrounded by millions of dollars worth of art while eating takeout Chinese food alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was technically wealthy beyond my wildest dreams, but I'd never felt more abandoned. My old photography clients began canceling bookings. Word had spread through New York's tight-knit social circles that I was involved in some kind of family lawsuit, that my integrity was in question. One bride's mother actually told me they were uncomfortable having someone under those kinds of allegations photographing their daughter's wedding. The only person who stood by me was my mentor from art school, David Chen, who'd been following my career with quiet pride. When he heard about the inheritance battle, he called immediately. "Samantha," he said gently, "I knew your grandfather. He came to several of my exhibitions over the years, always asking about your work, always proud. This sounds exactly like something he would do." Would the lawsuit succeed? Could Samantha prove her innocence and keep her inheritance? David's words gave me the strength to keep fighting. More importantly, he introduced me to Marilyn Santos, a retired gallery director who'd known both my grandfather and grandmother personally. "Thomas came to see me about 5 years ago," Marilyn told me over coffee. "He brought some of Helen's old photographs and asked if I thought they were gallery quality. I told him they were extraordinary, some of the best street photography I'd seen from that era. He was so proud, said it was a crime how the family had forgotten her artistic legacy." Marilyn agreed to testify on my behalf, and her testimony was devastating to Rebecca's case. She had documentation of multiple meetings with Grandpa Thomas, all of which showed him to be sharp, purposeful, and completely aware of what he was doing. But the real breakthrough came when Mr. Sterling presented the videos Grandpa had recorded. The courtroom fell silent as my grandfather's voice filled the air, clear and determined. "I am Thomas Harper, and I am of completely sound mind. I'm making this recording on March 15th to explain my decision to leave my art collection to my granddaughter Samantha." He spoke for 20 minutes, detailing his reasons with lawyer-like precision. He talked about Helen's forgotten artistic legacy, about watching Samantha's talent go unrecognized, about his belief that art should go to someone who understood its true value rather than its monetary worth. "Rebecca is a brilliant businesswoman who will build an empire with her inheritance. But Samantha is an artist who will build something more important, a bridge between artists and the world that needs to see their work." The judge dismissed Rebecca's lawsuit completely, but the victory felt hollow. Even with legal vindication, my family's silence continued. The money was mine, the collection was mine, but the cost had been higher than I'd anticipated. I threw myself into transforming the Chelsea building. Working with architects and designers, we created something extraordinary. 4 floors that flowed seamlessly between gallery space, working studios for emerging photographers, darkrooms equipped with both traditional and digital technology, and an apartment for me on the top floor. The renovation took 8 months. Every day, I'd arrive before dawn and work until midnight, partly because I was obsessed with getting every detail right, but mostly because the work kept me from thinking about the family dinners I wasn't invited to and the Christmas card that would arrive addressed only to the Harper family, meaning everyone but me. David introduced me to curators, critics, and artists who became my new chosen family. They saw my vision for the space and understood what I was trying to create. Not just another gallery, but a community for artists who, like me, had been told their work didn't matter. 3 weeks before the opening, I stood in the main gallery space as workers installed the final pieces. The walls glowed with carefully curated photographs that told stories of human resilience, beauty found in unexpected places, and truth captured in single moments. At the center of the main wall hung my grandmother's photographs, finally given the recognition they deserved after decades of being hidden away. I was adjusting the lighting on her street scene of 1960s Broadway when I heard footsteps behind me. "It's incredible," a familiar voice said softly. Who was the unexpected visitor? Had someone from Samantha's family finally come to see what she'd built? I turned around slowly, my heart hammering. Rebecca stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. Gone was her usual power suit and commanding presence. Instead, she wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger, more vulnerable. "Rebecca," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She stepped further into the gallery, her eyes moving across the walls with something I'd never seen from her before, genuine wonder. "I didn't know Grandma Helen was a photographer," she said, stopping in front of the Broadway street scene. "They're beautiful. Dad packed them away after she died," I said carefully. "Grandpa kept them all these years." Rebecca nodded, still studying the photograph. "I can see why he loved your work. You have her eye." The compliment caught me completely off guard. In 29 years, Rebecca had never once acknowledged my photography as anything more than an expensive hobby. "I came to apologize," she continued, finally meeting my eyes. "The lawsuit, the things I said about you. I was wrong. Angry, but wrong." I waited, not sure what to say. "I've spent the last few months thinking about what Grandpa said in that video. About how I'd build an empire but you'd build something more important." She gestured around the gallery. "He was right. Rebecca." "Let me finish," she said, holding up a hand. "I've been so focused on winning, on being the successful daughter, that I forgot we used to be friends. Remember when we were kids, how you take pictures of me building those elaborate sandcastles on the beach in the Hamptons?" I did remember. Before the comparison started, before she became the golden child and I became the disappointment, we'd actually enjoyed each other's company. "I still have those photos," I admitted. Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm proud of what you've built here, Sam. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." The gallery opening 3 days later exceeded every dream I'd dared to have. The space buzzed with energy as photographers, collectors, students, and art lovers moved through the rooms. Local TV news covered the event, calling it a new chapter in New York's art scene. But the moment that meant the most came when I spotted a familiar figure studying my grandmother's work with intense concentration. Dad stood alone by Helen's photographs, reading the information placard I'd written about her life and artistic vision. When he noticed me approaching, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "I forgot how talented she was," he said quietly. "I was young when she died, focused on building the business. I thought art was frivolous." "It's never too late to change your mind about that," I said gently. He nodded, then surprised me by pulling out his phone. Could you take a picture of me with her photographs? I'd like to remember this moment." As I framed the shot of my father finally honoring his mother's memory, I realized that this was what Grandpa Thomas had really given me, not just money or art, but the power to heal old wounds and create new connections. What would this new chapter in Samantha's life look like? How would her success change her relationships with her family? 1 year later, I stood in the same gallery space, but everything had changed. The Harper Photography Center had become exactly what Grandpa Thomas had envisioned, a thriving community of artists, a launching pad for emerging talent, and a bridge between photography and the broader world. We'd hosted 12 major exhibitions, published a quarterly magazine featuring new photographers, and launched a scholarship program for art students from low-income families. The program was named the Helen Harper Memorial Scholarship, finally giving my grandmother the recognition she deserved. More importantly, the gallery had become a place where artists who felt overlooked could find their voices. Every month, I received emails from photographers thanking me for giving them their first exhibition, their first sale, their first taste of being truly seen. But the most meaningful change was in my family relationships. Rebecca and I had dinner every few weeks now, sometimes talking business. She'd started collecting photography for Harper Real Estate's corporate offices, but more often just talking as sisters. She'd begun dating a museum curator, someone who shared her newfound appreciation for art, and seemed happier than I'd ever seen her. Dad still struggled with understanding my world, but he made an effort. He attended every major opening and had even commissioned me to photograph the Harper real estate team for their annual report. Mom had started volunteering at the gallery's educational programs, teaching young photographers about presentation and professionalism. The reconciliation wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still echoes of old patterns. But it was real, and it was ours. On this particular evening, as I prepared to close the gallery after a busy day, I found myself alone with my grandmother's photographs once again. I'd moved them to a permanent place of honor in the main space, and every day I spent a few minutes with them, feeling connected to the artistic legacy I'd inherited. My phone buzzed with a text from a young photographer in Detroit whose work I'd discovered on social media. She wanted to know if I'd consider her portfolio for our Emerging Artists program. "I've never had anyone believe in my work before," she'd written. "But your story gives me hope that maybe someone will see what I'm trying to say with my camera." I smiled as I typed back, inviting her to submit her portfolio and offering to schedule a video call to discuss her work. This was what Grandpa Thomas had really understood, that the gift wasn't just about me. It was about creating a ripple effect, a way for undervalued artists to find their place in the world. As I locked up the gallery and headed upstairs to my apartment, I paused at the bronze plaque by the entrance, the Harper Photography Center, in memory of Helen Harper, who saw beauty in everyday moments, and Thomas Harper, who believed in the power of art to change lives. "Thank you," I whispered to them both, the same words I spoke every night. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did, and for giving me the chance to help others be seen too." The sound of camera shutters from the darkroom below told me that tonight, like every night, someone was creating something new in the space that love and faith had built.